Welcome. This is day one directly from the Cannes Lions, just outside the DPC in the Lions Impact Hub. And I got a really amazing panel for you. Actually, it's probably one of my favorite panels of the week. I'm going to give you that. And I'm going to introduce you guys in just a minute. And we can discuss one of my favorite topics, something that I think I've tried to answer throughout my life. It started very early on with the first book I wrote, called Goodvertising. Back then, it had a bit of a naive premise, which was if you do something that's good for people and planet, it's good for brand and bottom line. So, excuse me, I was young, but that was the premise. And ever since that, I tried to kind of find out, does that have any truth to it? And I think the challenge is that it does seem like when we're talking about marketing and sustainability, in many ways, it's a bit of an oxymoron. Let's be honest. It's $1 trillion industry, and for the most part, we don't really make the world a better place, for the most part. But when done well, there's something that excites me. There's something that really pushes this agenda forward. So in some ways, it feels like two planets. Marketing is from Mars, sustainability is from Venus. So what we're going to do today is sort of explore this chemistry thing. So it's a bit of a therapy session. Can we get them to connect really well? Is this a lovable relationship that can last? Or are we going to be facing some tough breakups, some hard prenups, all of that stuff? So anyways, without much further ado, I'm just going to introduce our amazing panel here. First up, just because you're next to me, Mathias Wikström. I've known you for quite a few years. You're the CEO of Doconomy, and we're going to come to what that is in a while. On my left hand, we got Kalik, all the way from South Africa. I've wrote my first book in South Africa, believe it or not, yes. And another CEO, so I feel like I'm squeezed into the important people here. From eMedia Group, and you can also probably just, for the people who have been living under a rock, you can explain that in a little while what eMedia Group is. It's a really fascinating organization. Over here, Ali Res, we connected in Pakistan not too long ago. I think it was October. Chief Creative Officer, you've done some amazing work. We've judged together D&AD and lots of other things. So I'm really excited to have you here as well. We met back in the days when you were with the Nun. Now you are with the Bears, and you are teaching at
Imperial College.
Exactly, trying to kind of do some relationship exploration there, and Cyril, we met at where did we meet? We met in Mauritius. Cool. This is such an international crowd representing KFC here today. But let's begin with the women first, and maybe Sweta, actually, if you could. Yeah, just a few words if people don't know what De Beers is,
okay.
and then maybe the work you do at Imperial, just as a little.
Perfect. So I'm in my 26th year, which sounds like I'm a fossil, but I started my career 26 years ago. I worked on some really special brands: Lifebuoy, Dove, Special K. I was the global CMO of Evian, and now I work for De Beers, who does diamonds. Now, along the way, this question of marketing versus sustainability keeps coming back. So I wrote a course. I know it sounds super big, but I wrote a course of 4 modules, and I teach a master's program at Imperial College. And it is this love affair, divorce, prenup between sustainability and marketing. So
I'm looking forward to the answer there, right? For sure. Maybe just to jump to you a little bit, Mathias, there, if you could just briefly, because we know what KFC are and all that stuff. Let's jump to you. What is Doconomy? Because I know besides just working at Doconomy as a CEO now, you have a background as a creative. You won 3 Grand Prix, which is unfathomable. Congratulations with that. What is Doconomy? What is it that needs to be measured here?
So thank you. Yes, 3 Grand Prix, but I didn't do it on my own. I did it with the team and Johan Pil, my partner in crime. So Doconomy calculates. We started with calculating the environmental impact per transaction, making every transaction count. And to me, that's more of an educational ambition to illustrate cause and effect, so that people I think it's hard to act on things when you don't know what you're supposed to do, and it's even harder to find engagement when you're not measuring what is getting done. So this was the most simplest way to use the data in the current transactions to educate people around the effect of their lifestyle choices manifested through consumption using carbon emission scoring as a baseline.
So measurement is important, I guess, yeah?
Okay, whenever you use your payment card, you get one score for the transaction measured in the local currency, one score for the carbon emissions equivalent measured in kilos. Also in freshwater intensity scoring, if you would be interested in water more than in carbon, and I think a lot of the people in the world should be. But it can also be connected to social components. So it's bridging the E and the S, having representation, child labor, work ethics, what have you, connected so that you understand what is it that my money is enabling? What is it that I'm investing in with my consumption?
I think you're touching on planet sustainability a little bit here in some ways, right? Because what you cannot measure, you cannot change. And I think there's something there in the world of sustainability, and I think we sometimes forget in the creative industry. We're so obsessed about awareness, but I think we forget what impact it will actually drive. And Ali, I want to just jump to you a little bit here quickly, because how do you see us move forward? How do you make these quite complex topics, potentially complex topics, interesting for ordinary people? How do we get this water, carbon emissions? Because I think that's what you managed to do in a really concrete way.
That's a great question. One way we've learned to get people more actively engaged is to find a very personal reason for them. When you talk about scientific data in a scientific manner, there's a very cold barrier between the consumer who you're talking to and the kind of data you want them to remember. But if you get personal with that, now it could be anything. Like it could be something that's I'll take an example, something that could be religious, for instance, right? It could be something that's directly linked to income equality. But just whatever you can find that sort of connects very directly and personally to them, that's the way to do it. Otherwise, it just comes across as numbers, and you're right, it's hard to get through to people then. And I can think of a lot of projects that have done that very successfully, when you just get very close and personal and talk to people about what matters to them directly. For instance, I bike a lot, right? So for me, hotter and hotter temperatures, if you were to talk to me about it, you wouldn't talk to me about the degrees that are increasing every year. You talk to me about how I'm going to cycle less and less, and that's very personal to me. So I'd be more concerned then, just as an example.
I mean, I grew up on a bicycle in Copenhagen, right? So I do get that. And I actually want to follow up on that one, because so what I love about your career at KFC is, in fact, that, when I was thinking about this panel, you would not be the sort of typical sustainability guy. Yeah, you're not the typical sustainability guy to invite. Is that true? I mean, you've done some amazing work that I love, and that's creative and that's fun. Yeah. But I think one thing why I wanted to invite you was that you do something where you just get culture. And I know it's just so easy in Cannes to say people get culture. Yeah. But what does that mean for you? I think there was something that Ali said that resonated with some of the...
Yeah, it's a great setup. I was sitting here thinking, damn, I sell fried chicken, what am I doing here? But I think that, I'm on that side of the fence where I wake up every morning to drive commercial results. So I report to a board, I report to a team that's effectively prioritizing that as a result. But I've also been on the side of the fence where I'm looking after the brand and asking myself, how do we do good in the communities that we serve? And I think what you mentioned, Ali, just around what is culture? And I think culture today, I find marketers chasing trends, maybe influences, maybe cultural moments, right? But I think culture is, for me, it's a collective expression of what people care about. What do people care about when they wake up in the morning? They're worried about value, convenience, friends, community. And I think as a marketer, if you can find a meaningful role for your brand to play in those spaces, then you can start having the conversation internally about driving sustainability agenda. I love what you're saying about measurability, because as you know, any board member is going to want to know, well, if you spend even 2 hours of your day on this, what am I going to get back? So I think there is a meaningful role, but the brand has to actively, firstly, have a point of view in what do they actually want to do? And it should be about something that people care about. Don't place your brand in conversations and pat yourself on the back and say, hey, I'm there. Actually, do something that people care about, then growth is exponential.
And maybe there's a bit of a language that needs to change as well. That's why I like it when you sometimes talk, because you don't need to say sustainability or something like that. You reframe it a little bit. Khalid, I want to turn to you, obviously, because he brought up culture as a CEO of a big media organization, and we'll get into that. You can just briefly explain what that implies in South Africa for those who don't know that. But how do you see your responsibility as someone who, touches so many people on a daily basis?
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate being here, and I'm honored to be in this team company of the people around me. I know Sohail for many years, and I know he just doesn't sell fried chicken. He does much more than that for many years. Right. Quickly, we run the biggest media organization in Southern Africa, or in Africa. Canal Plus now. They're in Africa now with us, right? So they're bigger than us, but we're in the free-to-air space, and we in the entire vertical. We're making television, radio, movies, ads, the whole lot. We do everything. If you come to South Africa, you want to borrow a camera, you borrow it from us. You want to make a movie, you make it with us. You want to make an ad, we can do that for you. So that's our business, right? But talking about sustainability, we have millions of people who tune into us on a daily basis. No matter what you guys do about sustainability, the one thing you have to do is pass on the message. And when you pass on the message and people believe that your message is absolutely sincere, absolutely real, we can convert millions of people to the idea of the role that marketing plays in sustainability. I'll just give you an example. Just today in Cannes is an impact of the sustainability within nature. It's the hottest day in Cannes in 20 years for me today. And something is impacting that, right? Something about sustaining nature, something about sustaining the way we live, or impacting what's happening in Cannes right now. What's happening in London right now. It's the hottest day also, 38 degrees one of these days. Now, that's sustainability. What are we doing to educate people around us that you in marketing, you at KFC, you at Doconomy, wherever you are, what are you doing to preserve this land for people 30 years from now, 50 years from now? That's what we're about. So in sustainability, and I'm going to go to one big thing we are doing back in Johannesburg, Madrid, and Jakarta that I want to talk about, that talks directly to how sustainability can be used in marketing, in movies, in ads, in all aspects. I'm not here to sell the product. I'm here to tell you that it is a great product if we're talking about sustainability. Thanks.
I just have to chip in, because this is what makes me love this business so much and what ACT is doing. So we have engagement, we have education, we have relevance, we have reach. It's like a Marvel movie of superstars where creativity is the superpower, right? So if putting you four in a room together with Thomas, we would probably solve 95% of the world's problems. So I think that's what the magic sauce is with creativity. And that's why it is so interesting to see that working with measurements, which is important, of course, but creativity is the pivoting factor that disrupts what we expect, right? So instead of following a linear trajectory, I'm actually leaving for London tonight, so I'm going to experience the two cities, and not to steal the thunder, but it's instead of following a straight line, these superpowers and these insights could pivot to something much better, to something much more, to something less impactful. And that's exactly why I believe that ACT is doing such an important job in bringing us guys together like this under your command, Thomas.
And you're absolutely right. We have this because I think sometimes we deduct marketing and advertising to just one thing. And I think one thing that we actually haven't touched so much on right now is also this amazing idea when marketing and the role of the CMO embraces innovation in driving product innovation and just not accepting the status quo. Because one thing is what we say and how we reach people, but how can we change our products? How can we rethink what we deliver to the consumers? And I know that's one of your things, this sort of gap between saying and doing.
So as we grew up in the marketing industry, there was always this concept of say versus do. And there was this whole thing of, if you want to make a big claim, say you make someone's hair shiny, the whole job was like make it as shiny as black satin or diamond. So there was always this kind of very creative exaggeration of what your product does. So we always talked about it as a do versus say. And actually sustainability, and it's one of the modules that I teach, you actually have to flip that on its head. Sustainability you need to do first. Okay? Stop trying to say first. And I think that led to, I would say, almost a decade of a lot of greenwashing kind of work. And I'll give you a small example. I used to manage a brand called Volvic. It sells in France. I don't know if you've drunk the water, but it has a volcano on the bottle. And that entire area is actually a conservation area. So I don't know if you are aware, but there's a certain amount of water that you can get every year. And there's the upper limit because you have to take care of the nature around it. Now, we could tell a provenance story till the cows come home. But we found a way to connect it back to culture. So we tied up with Airbnb and we offered a night in the volcano. So you could go and live there. And you turn a sustainability idea into something experiential, something that people care about. And then they start to think that green volcano on the bottle is actually real. And it's not just a part of the logo, because you can't actually tell that story every day. So it's just how do you then pivot from just continuously badgering provenance to making it real?
Can I build on that? So I think I agree we should do and then we should really focus on that. I'd say we should walk the talk, but you should also talk the walk. And the reason I say that is I feel that we're operating as a CMO. I'm operating in a system that is entirely commercially driven. You know that, right? So it's very challenging. And I think if we do both in today's world, if the organization gets the credit, there's a much higher possibility that you will be able to continue investing in that. And I think that's where creativity really, really comes in. Because I feel that the first creative in any process is actually the marketer. The marketer is the first creative. And if you're sitting as a marketer, as a CMO, and say, I've only got 2% of my budget for sustainability, well, start getting creative about it. Start thinking about how can I make that 2% 5%, as an example. I think that's where it starts. I don't think we talk enough about how we enable more creativity from the off. We kind of leave it to the creatives to figure it out. But actually, the first person that should be thinking laterally is the marketer themselves. And if it starts there, then a 2% budget becomes a 5%. On the board meeting agenda, if sustainability is not there, how do I use lateral thinking to make sustainability part of the agenda? I think that's where it really, really sort of kicks off. So, yeah.
So maybe that brings us to a good thing, because we need to sort of go to this couple therapy thing, right? So we would probably need to bring some reassuring words to kind of get them together. So what would be one thing that we could bring forward to people here today? This is a sort of healing power. Why can we succeed when we bring advertising and sustainability together? Do we have one word of advice? This is a little glue. Believe in this, because I think there's something to it that you say, like, unless you can build the business case, unless you can build the internal credibility in terms of, and I think that's what also is lacking in advertising in general. You need to have the bravery, because one thing is the reach, but I think it is pretty real that most CMOs are like, where do we actually know if half the budget is actually effective? Yeah. So why can't we take this 2-3%? So anybody wants to?
Yeah, I can. Last year we did this project with Unilever in the Middle East, and it was a very simple activation where it was called a good deal for everyone. And if you bought Unilever products, they'd plant mangrove trees. Just very simple. It resulted in a 12% sales growth for them, which is phenomenal. 12% over the course of that particular activation, measured specifically for the products that were being advertised. I think there needs to be more coverage of success stories such as that. I think what you said about talk the walk is also very necessary for others to catch on. There is enough data out there that shows that this does work. And it'll work more and more given that younger generations are more aware and they're looking for more action. I think we just need to publicize it a lot more. I don't think people talk about it enough. I don't think people show off it enough. And especially the commercial results around it. That's how you'll get more brands on and more corporations on.
I accept what Ali is saying, because the publicity of what you're doing in something that has such goodwill has to be heard more often. And just to emphasize that, what does advertising want to do? Or what does it do very well? Or tries to do very well? It tries to grab attention. That's what advertising does. It should be doing that. Marketing should be doing that, grabbing attention. Now, if you grab the attention, you're the first people who grab the attention. If you're able, the creatives that is, if you're able to grab the attention, and once you have the attention of the person, what do you do with it? So that 2% and 3% and 5% should be working to make sure that some part of your message is around sustainability. In the you've got to work it into the creativity. And that's why I agree. The publicity function is around, and us who are broadcasters in the world, in our case, we are a hybrid of many things, broadcasters, movie makers, ad makers, and whatever else have you. Broadcasters in the world should be the ones. The YouTubers of the world should be the people. Anybody who's talking to mass people should be one who comes together with marketers to say, how can we help you push this line of sustainability? Because you are grabbing the attention of the people we serve. How could, through you, we get sustainability as a headline focal point? That's what I wanted to say. Thanks.
To build on that and on what you were saying, I think, so what happens when it increases with 12% is that it actually addresses something with relevance. It addresses something that matters, and it addresses an underserved opportunity. And 12% is an amazing growth, and that should be, praised as a success story. At Doconomy, working through banks, what we try to do is use the blueprint of planet, person, and prosperity. And all of the three need to see relevance in what we do. Because if you fail either of them, it's not going to fly. But I think relevance is the absolute most important point. And we see a lot of creativity that is not relevant, but very creative. It doesn't solve a problem. It doesn't really, But it's great craft or great what have you. But in the world today, where we see a lot of the leadership letting the individuals down on security, on environmental issues, on social issues, there is so much relevance left on the table for the private sector to tap into. Calling it sustainability, I don't know. Why would we call it sustainability? Call it problem solving, for God's sake. Because that's what it is. And then you're deserving the role in the person's life. And you build on the trust, you build on the brand preference, and you build on the recommendability. All of these KPIs that we use in marketing, like, oh, this is good, this is great. But the greatest component is helping someone that needs to be helped. And that any brand can do. If it's great chicken when I'm hungry, or if it, what have you. It's just playing the role we do, but looking at it through this green threesome of components kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a brand out approach, then by large, you're not going to be relevant. People don't care. People don't wake up in the morning thinking about, hey, I'm ready to get that KFC ad. They don't really care at all. I think if we make sustainability an additional sacrifice on the consumer's behalf, your impact is already gone. You've got to find a way to meaningfully play a role in the things they care about and creatively express that in a way that actually makes people feel emotions, makes them feel like they belong to a community, whatever the case may be. I think the initial intent is where, for me, the opportunity is, because you've got to make a sincere intention to do good in the world. You've got to wake up with that and then find creative ways to play.
Cool, and I'm really happy you brought up the sort of the proof point behind this. One of the pieces of research we launched this year with Walk was, in fact, we looked at 13 years of the 100 most effective ads globally. So now we have 13 years of data. 30 to 40% of those ads touches on social, environmental components. So I'm very happy that Cannes Lions and Walk have given us these proof points to actually say it works. And it comes back to what you say. When we look at the data, it says care, because a lot of these topics are more emotional, and emotionality leads to effectiveness. Before we wrap this up, I want to touch on one thing, because if we can convince people now that they buy into the business case, we got CMOs who dare to take risks and move from 2 to 5%. There's another challenge in organizations. That's also why it's good to have two CEOs around the table here, which is around building competence, the organizational challenges. Why is it, if we all know this, why is it so difficult to get marketing and sustainability to work together? It seems siloed. It really seems a very dysfunctional couple. So maybe if we all just say, what can we do to make this work better? So the organizational challenge.
If I may start. Yeah. So what can we do as from executive management or whatever? What could we do? There is not much you could do to change habit, but you could slowly but surely influence the way work, the output is being done. I'm just going to tell you about a real example in our lives. And Sohail knows about this because we are two South Africans here, by the way. He highlighted that to me earlier. You see, there was a case, and this is about environmental sustainability, environmental awareness and sustainability in making an ad. We're commissioned to make an ad for a water brand in Italy. And the director who was commissioned to do that used our facility because, and I'll tell you just now what the facility is, because taking children deep into the Alps, right into the Alps, was an issue of environmental problems and sustainability. Taking the same little children below the age of 10 years old deep into rural areas of the world where there's water and lakes, for example, like Alaska and parts of that, was a problem for environment and sustainability. We worked around that, and our business invested in a virtual facility. I wish I could show you that ad. You'll say, wow. It's an ad for Levissima. It's with children, and it's in the Swiss Alps and in the lakes of North America somewhere, deep in Alaska. But the children didn't leave our studio. It was all because we are pushed that way because of environmental awareness and sustainability. Thank you very much for having me.
You actually did mention that amazing studio, and I think it also shows some
Johannesburg and Madrid.
Amazing, and it does show a technological solution to. Because as a creative back in the days, I got to admit, I was one of those creatives who thought, how can I somehow write into the script that I have to go down to Cape Town and shoot that film? Guilty as charged. Mathias.
Yes, so thank you. No, I love that story, and I think that's like incremental enhancement and improvement is extremely important. But I also think that at the starting point, when we built Doconomy, I wasn't sure if it was a climate fintech, if it was an NGO, if it was almost an agency, or if it was an organization of some sort. And to be honest with you, it didn't matter. And I think that's where it begins. So organizational alignment around what problem that it is that you're trying to solve. At the end of the day, or when you have woken up and you had your breakfast and brushed your teeth and you've done your 3 hours of yoga and learned 5 languages and read 6 books and then you go to work, then you become a specialist, of course. But everyone needs to spend sufficient amount of time around the problem that the organization is trying to resolve. and they need to agree with that problem being the most important thing. Then they can be the specialist, and then they can do what they do best. But if there is alignment around that, all other KPIs will be directed in the same output, and pride, which I think is an extremely important organizational equity, pride will be built on the same building blocks, not on the building blocks of market progress or a Grand Prix at Cannes or on sustainability metrics being invited to the UN to tell your story. But it will be built using the same building blocks for everyone. And I think that's not only how you build a strong organization and a strong team, but that's also how you showcase progress. To your point, one way of doing that is solving a problem like you guys did with the production side, which is one important side. The other one is having everyone believing in the same way.
I'd say it's about, for me, it's about KPIs versus the right thing to do. As a marketer, as a CMO, if I wake up in the morning and I'm single-mindedly thinking about my KPIs, I can tell you for a fact I'm not going to do any good in the world. I'm going to sell a lot of chicken, I want to fly a lot of miles, and I'm not going to really make an impact. So I think as marketers, if it's not on the agenda, put it on the agenda. And that's where you asked what are the limiting factors. There's fear. I think everyone has a boss. Everyone has some form of fear around, well, I got to do this. If I don't do this, then I won't be able to look after my family, so on and so forth. But I genuinely, in my experience, whenever I have pushed the agenda, it has always been with the right, sincere intention to do good. And when you show that to a leadership team, as an example, or a board, and they see doing good as an actual, positive in their life, they actually accept it. So my philosophy is it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, and that's the philosophy that I've followed. Whenever I wanted to do good in the world, I've put it on the agenda, whether they like it or not. And I think that's what's helped push it a little bit. I may not have made the biggest difference in the world, but at least I can go back home and say, you know what, I tried. And if every marketer woke up like that, we'll make a much bigger difference.
Tough act to follow. No, but I actually feel that, I know Thomas introduced me as I teach at Imperial College, but I was on a panel like this and talking about water in a plastic bottle, right? So whether it's Evian or Volvic, and then they said, would you help us write a course? And I rocked up on the first day at Imperial with a 150 slide deck. And they were all staring at me saying, how do you plan to teach people with that? And it took us almost 3 months and some teaching assistants to turn it into a course. So in some ways, I feel like I'm giving back because we do an Evian case study in that. And it's in the first year, we had only 40 people sign up because it's an elective. But slowly they're actually considering it to be a part of the course because next year it was 70 people, now it's 100 people, so it happens between Jan and April. But what I find is, the art of education is completely different from what we do in our daily lives in marketing, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to do this differently. I said, can the whole class watch a Netflix episode, a Netflix show where they talk about plant-based milk? And so the case study is that you have to be a CEO of a dairy company. How would you react? And so I try to do it differently, but I feel education is one way of getting in. And if you can meet the marketers where they are, the marketers of tomorrow, it could make a difference. So that's my I think I did something.
Wow, that's really well put. Look, just a couple of things I want to say is that, so I've got a short story about sustainability, right? So I have a 9-year-old son, and I go to pick him up from school in Dubai, where temperatures can go up to 45 degrees in the summer. And what happens is that you park your car and you do a 10-minute walk to the school gate and you pick up the kid and you bring back to the car. And if you turn off the air conditioning in your car, that car is going up to easily about 60 degrees inside the car, right? So sometimes you leave the AC on. And when you do that, you hear a really grand lecture from a 9-year-old I like seriously. I don't stop hearing about it for days. And it's like, how could you leave the AC on? I don't mind getting into a really hot. And I think I think future generations will be a lot more aware. And I think there is power in that to be used to speak to authority. I think one thing that marketers, when they hold power, especially in certain countries, is where we forget is to get governments to impose regulations that enforce corporations and marketing departments to think about this. That's one area that I haven't seen much work in. And the reason why I'm linking that to the story is that it's made me think, because it's coming from an authority in my life, where it's like, you gotta do this way, otherwise I'm not gonna make you forget it. And I think when you impose a rule, you're forced to then look at it in that certain way. I think there's not much of that. I think I hope for a future where there's much more regulation around, as a corporation, what are you doing for the environment? And we're gonna grade you on that. And there needs to be some sort of an accountability process there at some level. That'd be great to have.
Ali, thank you so much. And this seems to be quite a bit of a superhero journey in terms of saving this challenging interplanetary relationship between marketing and sustainability. But as I said, I think I started my journey 18 years ago with a simple question. I think we'll keep exploring, keep understanding how we can keep this relationship alive, as you do in any marriage, in any relationship. But I think it really starts with, first of all, setting out that vision, setting out that agenda on the top of this, and I think we've got a lot of good arguments for why that needs to happen. So I think we'll have to end, unfortunately, today with saying, an encouragement of today's conversation is hopefully you've got some arguments, some inspiration why you need to keep this relationship alive. And if you haven't, I think the one good advice is please just put it on the agenda, and I think you will see the results follow. So first of all, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules. And hopefully we'll see a long-lasting, sustainable marriage going forward between marketing and sustainability. Thank you so much. Cheers. Thanks.